Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Belcher, for the introduction. I'm looking forward to working with you all today, and thanks for taking your time out. I know it's busy. Please don't feel like you have to keep your cameras on. Don't worry, it's not. I'm not going to make it that formal. I want you all to be comfortable. I know you guys will be running in and out with school still in session, and just please stay muted. Um, because we get echoes and things like that, and it can be a little bit of a distraction for everyone that's joining. I'm Rachel Njenga, and I've been at KDE a couple of years now. I was in the same school for the last 10 years as a second grade and special education instructor. I will tell you that I was drowning my first year in education. I said, I don't think we got enough college classes to prepare for the behavior even 10 years ago. Now you add in a pandemic. So we know that kids have been at home. There's been less structure. It's just been a lot of changes. So um, I know everyone is working so hard to do the things that they need to do to make sure their classrooms are functioning, at 100%. And, one of the things I always say, you can't teach academics and you can't teach all those things until the child's needs have been met and their behavior expectations are there. You'll spend your whole year just trying to work on behavior, and you'll miss a lot of instructional time if you don't have those things in place. Um, and I put like the training expectations if we were in person, but again, just silence your phones, limit your distractions if you can. When we chat and things like that, please feel free to put stuff in the chat box, questions. Mr. Belcher's going to be looking for those. If you have something that you want to say, just raise your hand, let me know. And then we have some objectives today. One is going to be to obtain those preventative strategies and information about positive behavior interventions and supports, and to review Tier 1 interventions to start the school year and refresh classroom strategies with that proactive approach, whether virtual or in person. Before we get started, I told Mr. Belcher earlier, I'm at home today and the garbage truck has not ran yet, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time for when it does come and what the dogs are going to respond to. So if you hear barking, I apologize. And, here's a little check-in I like to do. You can do this with your staff if you're an administrator, if you are a counselor, if you are doing a grade level meeting, just a little check. So today, how are you feeling? Just take 3 words from this next box and you can type it into the chat. We don't even have to talk about it. It just kind of is a name it to tame it. So you can just say these are the things that you're feeling. A lot of people, I'm sure, are going to be tired. Even though it's just Tuesday, it's a rough time right now. Mr. Belcher, you can tell me some of the things that people type if you want. But you can do this as an activity before meetings, a way to check in with different grade levels, especially high school level. This is a little bit more appropriate. Smaller kids, you could do a smaller group check-in with, a word bank for them that is appropriate for them. This is just a way to see how your classroom is rolling, how your staff is, how they're doing, how they're feeling. Very simple, very easy, takes just a couple minutes out of your day to check in with your people. And what kind of words do we have in there, if any, so far?
I am seeing hopeful, inspired, grateful.
Oh, I love that. I never get those words. I'm so glad you guys are feeling some hope and some good things.
And then festive, hopeful, excited, joyful, focused, blessed, content, joyful, satisfied. I like this group.
Yes, my groups are never like that. You guys don't understand, so this makes me so happy. I wish this was in person.
Somebody finally truthfully said tired.
Tired would be one of mine. So I think, I've got my coffee over here, but sometimes that doesn't always do the trick. And I know we're getting down to the holidays, so it's going to be a very well needed break for many of you. Well, I'm glad to hear it, but this again is just a good group check-in that you guys can do. I'm going to play you this video. I started doing this in my self-care for educators, but I've really found that a lot of people kind of need this gentle reminder. So I just want to play this for you, and let me know if you can't hear the volume or anything, please.
We're hearing it, Rachel.
Okay, great. So one of the reasons I show this video is I feel like it takes every person in the building. Sorry, male person came. That's why my dogs are barking. So when you look at PBIS, even if you're a school that's implementing, not implementing, just getting started, you have to remember that it takes everybody in the building. And, being a team is a lot of work. There's a lot of different personalities that go together. But it takes everyone to, get behavior under control, get school-wide expectations, classroom expectations. And sometimes we forget that kids come into the building with these behaviors. We don't realize what they're going through outside of their home. When you're in a smaller community, I was telling Mr. Butcher, I actually lived in Lee and Owsley most of my life. So those smaller communities, you kind of know the families and you know what's going on a little bit more. But sometimes behind closed doors, there's a lot more going on than we could even imagine. So just remembering that when kids come into the building, a lot of them have so many reasons to have these behaviors that, can drive us batty at times. So just remember that. And, just think about your people that are snapping at you a little bit, or, another teacher that might have gotten cranky or things like that. I always just think this is a good reminder, especially right now. And I am going to save you guys a little bit of time today, I told Mr. Belcher, I'm not going to go through all the PBIS stuff, but I do want to give just a little basic overview, but I'm not going to take you through all the ins and outs. I want to just give you actual preventative things that you can take away with you all today. And you know, this training is built for classroom teachers, but it also helps administrators, counselors, people that are supporting staff to give new staff ideas. I wish that I would have known what I did by the time I left teaching, but it took me 10 years to learn things or learn how to manage behavior. And if you're good at behavior, you're probably the person that has most of the kids that have those bad behaviors or those unexpected behaviors that you don't always prepare for. They did not teach this in college. So I do think that it is a learning experience. When teachers come into the classroom, you never know what's going to happen or what you're going to get or what you're going to have to deal with. You know, PBIS is that evidence-based 3-tiered framework. And it improves and integrates all of your data systems and practices. You know, you see, that's the 3 things of PBIS. And, you know, data should be driving every decision that we make in our buildings, either school-wide, classroom-wide. Data is going to tell us a story, even when we aren't sure what's going on with our students. It always tells a really good story. You know, and it's not a curriculum you purchase or something you learn during a one-day professional development. It is that commitment to addressing student behavior through those systems change. And when it's implemented well, students tend to achieve improved social and academic outcomes. Their school experience is better. There's that reduced exclusionary discipline practices, and school personnel feel more effective. Again, you know, PBIS is built on those systems, data, practices. Again, you know, when you think about how much time you spend doing behavior or dealing with a student's behavior, it takes so much time out of the classroom. And, you know, and every few minutes counts. You guys know this. We only get our students for a little bit of time. You know, in those tier 1 practices, when you think of the 3 tiers of intervention, what we're learning today is all going to be about tier 1. So tier 1 is those school-wide expectations and behaviors that we teach, those established classroom expectations, and that continuum of procedures for encouraging expected behavior and discouraging problem behavior, and those procedures for encouraging school and family partnership. And it is important to include your parents that come into your classroom should know what your procedures are. They should know what PBIS is. If you're using PBIS, they should know what you're doing. Having that united front with parents helps to have those uncomfortable conversations later on when they don't understand why a child was disciplined a certain way, or you know, why you didn't contact them on certain aspects of things happening in your classroom. Parent communication is really important, you know, and it's good to give more positive parent, you know, having that positive parent relationship, positive parent calls, more positive than negative, because when they answer the phone, they're like, what do you do now? You know, now it's like they get excited because, you know, their child might have done something great for the day. Again, today's focus is tier 1 classroom structures and procedures. We're going to talk about school-wide expectations, routines, acknowledgments, that in-class continuum of consequences that are implemented within the classroom, and those consistent school-wide systems. A lot of people have these things in their staff handbooks, which is always great because you can share that with your families, and then a lot of informal walkthroughs to see if things are being done the right way at tier 1. I don't know about you guys, but I've been to a lot of tier 1 trainings and tier 2 trainings, even some of the ones that we do, and we give you all of the information, but we don't always give you examples of things that you can start doing to, you know, make your classroom more efficient. And so today my goal was to give you preventative strategies that's going to help you be able to keep your classroom running a lot more smooth. You know, and we say, why develop that system for teaching behavior? Behavior is your prerequisite for academics. Your procedures and routines create structure, and we all know that students, they may not act like they want to follow the structure, but most of our students need it. And, for a child to learn something new, it has to be repeated on that average of 8 times. And for them to unlearn an old behavior, and replace it with a new one, it has to be repeated at least 28 times. So when those kids come in, we can't discipline them for behaviors that we haven't taught them. So if you have expectations in your classroom, your students have been seeing you model, you have practiced the expectations, they know what it is, then you can discipline. But to discipline a child that has no clue that that was even an expectation, or that's what, they hadn't been taught anything about it, a lot of times we'll be like, well, they know better. They don't know better. Kids don't know what they don't know, just like adults don't know what they don't know. Why focus on those routines and procedures? Because students like to be able to predict what's going to happen throughout their day. We know those interruptions that happen can cause chaos, and, certain kids do well with change and certain kids don't. So, they're more likely to be engaged and less likely to be problem behaviors when we have routines and procedures in place. My rule is like no downtime, basically. Everything is structured. Even the downtime is structured. But one way to increase that predictability is to establish those routines, especially early in the school year, or like we're getting ready to go into the holidays. So coming back from the holidays is a great time to start reteaching classroom routines and procedures with your students. So right now we're going to talk about classroom activities, getting students' attention, and transitions. And then specially designed lesson plans. So providing initial lesson plans for teachers to begin teaching behavior. You can do this by grade level. You could do this as a team. You could do this as a school and just kind of, scaffold it as they go up from K to 5. I put some behavior lesson plans into the Google link that you guys were given so that you don't have to recreate the wheel, and I have a ton on hand if you need more. Build on what you have, your character education that you're using, and develop that system for expanding those behavior lesson plans throughout the year. Build it into your curriculum. Your SEL and PBIs can go hand in hand when you are teaching those lessons. And then find a program that fits your needs, your school, your students. Pick what works for you, and what, building a classroom community is going to be so much of what keeps your classroom going all year. So those little lesson plans and those little activities, it helps your classroom become a community. Being intentional with your implementation and creating those behavior lesson plans that already has SEL infused in them. And then look at your data and be prepared to try new things and change. One of the things we know as teachers, we have to be flexible. We have to be able to change lesson plans. I know that probably everybody has experienced that day that you come into the classroom, you've worked really hard on this lesson plan and you think it's going to go great. And unfortunately, it was like the biggest flop, but you had worked so hard on it. You were so excited about it. So you still have to give them that content. So you have to regroup, replan, and then do the lesson plan again. And it's the same for these programs. It's going to be trial and error. And it's going to be getting to know your students to know what is going to fit their needs. I included Harmony SEL because it is a free SEL program. You can find it online and you can register for your classroom. It's grades K through 6, and it has those online resources that are grade level specific. Again, it's free. They do have some trainings for it that are free through, I think Kentucky Avery does some of those as well. And then just being intentional with your goals and your school and home connections. There's online stories, and the stories kind of set the tone for the lesson. And then activities to build your classroom community. So I think that's a great little program to consider if you don't want to have to spend that extra money, or if you don't already have a program in place. And then strategies for success. You want to describe specific observable behaviors for each expectation. Plan to model the desired behaviors. Provide students with written and graphic cues. I always say it's good to have those visual cues, but if you are modeling those desired behaviors, you have to model exactly what you want from your students. What do you want it to look like from each student? Acknowledge their efforts, give that positive praise. You want to build them up front, and then you can slowly, become a little more lax on those rewards, and plan to reteach and restructure as you need to, and allow students to participate in the development process, and then use those teachable moments in your core subject areas and non-academic times. And when you're modeling expectations, and then you model your kids practice, you have visual expectations put up somewhere, you have to practice more than once. It might take one time, it might take 20 in order for the students to understand the expectation. But once they know it, I was at a school that was a PBI school. Our first year, we did not have it. The second year, we started implementing. By the time I left, it's like it ran like a well-oiled machine, because all those kids that had started at the beginning, by the time they got to 5th grade, they all knew the expectations for their school, their hallways, their bathrooms. Kids would walk down the hall with their arms crossed on the 2nd grade tile facing forward. You could go out in the hall at any time, and at least 75% of those kids that were walking alone would do that, if not more. And it's because they had years and years of the same expectations, the same practicing, especially like after holidays and breaks is always a good time. The beginning of the year, we would do at least 3 days of practicing expectations, more if needed. And that was like classroom, school-wide, cafeteria, hallway, transitioning to specials. Everyone in the building knew the expectations. Teachers modeled and practiced constantly. But that first 3 days was the most crucial to teaching those new expectations for each classroom. And then coming back from holidays or breaks was always a good time to take a good 2 to 3 days again to reteach those expectations. And it seems redundant, and it seems like, oh my gosh, this is boring, or it's, I was not on board when we first started PBIs years ago. By the time I left, we were a Gold Star school, and it was because we had worked so hard, and you really saw the results, and it does take several years to see those results. And then this is just, I liked this little cartoon. What are you doing here? And I'm practicing waiting for the bus. Is that something you have to practice? And it is, if you want to be good at it. And that's the way I look at teaching and modeling expectations. You are modeling, you're teaching these kids, and they're going to practice if they want to be good at it. And then having that school-wide reinforcement and acknowledgement system, and I'll let you guys read the little meme here. And I'm sure you've had students that said I'm behaving well, and they know that you're trying to get them to do well, so they know how the systems are in place throughout the building. So you have a few that'll catch on. Just think about those immediate and long-term reinforcements given by adults in the building. Students displaying that desired school-wide behavior. When we were at our school, we did dragon dots for a chart outside the classroom. That was for things that happen outside the classroom. If you saw a student doing well in the cafeteria for breakfast, waiting in line, doing well in the hallway, you'd give them a dragon dot because you had to keep them with you. And they would take it back to their classroom and say, oh, I got a dragon dot for this. So they were really excited, or, you could walk to the class with them if you had time. Red tickets for classroom. Golden tickets was for good character, like character traits, like being a good friend, helping out, being respectful, things like that. And you can design that however you want, or you may already have things in place that are working for you. Age-appropriate reward systems for both school-wide and classroom-wide. And then, when you have a good school-wide acknowledgement system, it increases the likelihood that those desired behaviors will be repeated. And it focuses staff and students' attention on desired behaviors, and it does foster that positive school climate and reduces the need for engaging in those time-consuming disciplinary measures. I included this PowerPoint, so any of the links that you see on these screens you'll be able to access later. Again, I wanted to try to not take up so much of your time because I know you guys are busy. And then what does 5 positives to 1 negative mean? This was always a good rule of thumb, and I'm glad I learned this. So when you interact with students, you should have 5 positive interactions before your negative one, And I can remember trying to think, how can I give them 5 positives when they are, not doing their work, talking, this, that, and the other. So I would go over and be like, I love the way you're sitting in your seat. I love the way your feet's on the floor. I love the way you have your pencil in your hand, and you have to come up with these things, but they do so much better when you give positive comments before you give those negative ones. And one person that I know used to keep 5 paper clips in their pocket. So that was their reminder. And they would move the 5 positive over to the other pocket back and forth for kids, that they've said 5 positive things to the 1 negative. And your ratio of interactions, you really want to have that 5-to-1 interaction, and trying to give positive interactions with your students, not always negative. Sometimes the kids that can cause the most disruption and things in the class, they get the most negative interactions from us. And if we gave a little bit more positive interaction, sometimes it counteracts that behavior. Obviously knowing your kids, and I'm going to warn you all, I hear the garbage truck coming, so you may hear your dogs barking. And negative interactions are not wrong. They are sometimes necessary, but that key is to have those positive interactions as well. You don't want to just be the negative, have a negative interaction with certain students all the time, and they have nothing positive with you. That really breaks your relationship with those students. When you start to give those positives to students that you don't normally give positives to, you'll start to see those changes occur. And then I know how hard it is. And, I gave this little scenario, like students completing a written assignment. One student struggles with writing and has difficulty completing even a couple of sentences, and another student writes clearly, concisely. What would effective praise look like for each student? Well, it's easy to say, hey, you're doing a great job. I love the sentences that you have. And then you've got that one student over there drawing circles on his page and things like that. I would say, you are a great artist, but let's see if we can turn your art into words. Or and it's hard to pull from those things. And I even had I went to a training one time, and the guy goes, it's hard sometimes to have those, even like adults. There's one student you just don't click with. You got to find one thing you like about that student, whether it's their hair, it's the way they dress, they have great tennis shoes. There's got to be something you can focus on besides the bad behavior that they keep giving you. So once you start to see one good, then it starts to lead to more, and just giving more positive interactions with that student not only changes you, but it does change them. Thinking about where you can make the greatest impact with that 5-to-1. And most oftentimes kids are not expecting those positive comments like, oh, I see you doing this. And then you eventually get to, but, we have 5 minutes left on this assignment. Let's answer these last 3 questions. So just remember that as you're interacting with your students. And a lot of times the only interactions they have with adults that are positive are at school. So, try to remember that as well. And I know you guys know this. Acknowledgement of appropriate behaviors. Given group discipline issues, like everybody's talking, everybody gets 5 minutes off recess. Well, there was probably at least 10 kids that weren't talking. So, trying to remember not to do that. And then students divided into groups earning points is fine. An entire class completes work on time. They all get 10 minutes of free time. Make it more of a positive group contingency instead of negative ones. That token economy that can be based on your school reward systems. And then the next thing, I know a lot of people still use clip charts. Well, PBIS, I will say, through the years, it used to be, we had clip charts in our building, and then they were like, no, clip charts are not appropriate because it humiliates students, takes away from what they might be doing right. So you've thrown that 5-to-1 ratio out the window because all you see is the wrong. You don't see anything right that they're doing. They don't teach that appropriate or expected behavior. It enables students to mock the students that are not doing so well. And then just trying to find a way to keep up with behavior that doesn't involve the whole class. And then, creating a plan for classroom management. So at the beginning of the year, how do you determine what needs to be established and modeled in the classroom? When do you teach that, and how often should you review? And it's simple. Everything has to be taught, from the way they come in every morning, the way they put their stuff away, the way they sit at their desk, the way they ask to sharpen a pencil. Every expectation that you expect in your classroom, you have to teach the students. Not every student comes in and knows the appropriate behaviors for a classroom. So teach and model those clear expectations. They'll be connected to your school-wide expectations if you're a PBIS school. And even if you're not, it's best practice to have a similar expectation so that no matter where you are in the building, the expectations are the same. Again, always involve parents in the process so they know those classroom expectations. You can create a PowerPoint at the beginning of the year to walk kids through the modeling. You can teach them, you can go over it with them, but again, take those few days to get started, or even after breaks is a great time to come back and start fresh. Teaching and modeling classroom expectations, again, you have to ask or model how to ask for help, bathroom, drinks, how to sit at the desk, how to turn in work, how to turn in homework. Because I know you all been grading homework and be like, where is so-and-so's? I know they finished it, but they put it in the wrong place because, they didn't know that's exactly where it needed to go, or they forgot. So just trying to model those expectations helps allow for a lot less issues throughout the year. How to use different types of math manipulatives because blocks become building blocks. Even creating a little time for them to have that time to play with the blocks. Building all that into your schedule and your lesson plans makes it a lot easier in the long run. How to use outdoor playground equipment, how to slide, how to swing. Everything you do, all grade levels, high school, middle, elementary, should be taught your expectations. Kids should know when they come in your room what the expectation is. And it does decrease the amount of possible disciplinary issues later. And I'll show you one way that it used to drive me crazy, like when kids are interrupting when you're teaching. And so we came up with hand signals to minimize the interruptions. It's not something you have to use. I just want to give you some different preventative strategies to help have less distractions in your classroom. This one was our hand signal for the bathroom. So a student would just raise their hands, cross their fingers. They didn't have to say anything. You could walk by, touch them on the shoulder and say, go. You could point to them and say, go. However you want to do it. But they didn't have to speak out. They didn't have to interrupt. All they did was hold that hand signal up. And you can, shake your head yes or no. And, kids knew what the expectation was of when they could ask to go to the bathroom. Or maybe in your classroom, you have how many times they can go to the bathroom in a day. Or do they need to sign out? Do they need to take a hall pass? All of that will be taught, in the beginning. And this comes from there was 3 people that train, and it's called APL. And I put the link on here. They actually are the ones that teach about hand signals, and then some task and time is something I'll show you in a minute that we did. But these are just easy ways to keep those expectations, or not the expectations, to keep those interruptions down. And then water, we used just 3 fingers up in the air. Drinking rules were established, hand signals modeled and practiced. Teachers, would respond accordingly. Anywhere in our building, that was a classroom expectation. This was a non-negotiable from our principal. All the kids had to know these signals. So in every single place that they went, if they did that, every staff in the building knew what this meant, including subs and things coming in. Everybody knew what the signals were. Closed fists meant you had a question, and you also talked to them about when it is appropriate to ask questions. And open palm, was something like, okay, I have the answer to this. And then task and time, this is something that was hard for me to kind of get used to because it's a little bit awkward. When you're giving students a task, you can do this with adults too. If you're an administrator and you want to make sure your people are staying on task and time at your meetings, this is something our principal would do. And it would kind of be fun at times because, we're zoned out at the end of the day. Most of the time we were exhausted and just trying to make it through the meeting. And this did keep you focused. So you give an individual task and then you assign a time to it. Like you have, your task is to read chapter 1, and then you have 5 minutes, and then you go to your student. What's your task? They would say it. Go to another student. What's your time? If a student did not get the correct task or time, you would go to another student that you knew would know the task or time, and then you would still go back to the other student to make sure they knew the task and the time. That way everybody's on the same page, and it's repeated multiple times usually. And then keeping those students, it keeps those students focused on their assigned task, how much time they have to complete it, so that they're not playing because they know they only have 5 minutes to complete this. And use a timer to keep yourself and the students on task. Online timers, I put one up here as an example. This was online stopwatch. You put it on, it's got the sound if you have a smart board. If not, you can use those handheld timers, and the kids will start to know the beeps of it. And I had different timers, like at my small reading groups or group work, or when kids needed to move around for their reading groups and things like that. So we use task and time for everything in our classroom. And then no downtime. We know it happens sometimes, but plan for those students that finish early or downtime that occurs. Create a downtime menu and teach the expectations when using that menu. We did writing baskets that had note cards, writing prompts, greeting cards, fun gel pens, reading time, a homework catch-up time. So if they had homework or things they didn't finish, they put it in a folder. And all of that had to be completed before they could do one of the other, downtime activities. Let's see, we did, and we modeled how to use every single station, but we did rotate the stations. So you didn't have the same ones all year long. We would try to, every couple months, change it to something else so it would be a little bit more fun or engaging for the students, or kind of related to the curriculum that we were working on at the time. And then addressing student behaviors. Some students like the attention that they get, that negative attention, and then it becomes a whole bigger deal because they have students watching. It is best to always take a student in private. Never reprimand them in front of others. Just kind of lean down. Hey, I know that you want to talk right now, but right now we're working. Always quietly. If you do it loud, like, hey, stop talking, well, then everybody's involved. So it's better to keep that one-on-one. Discipline issues, one-on-one. When you get an audience, it tends to escalate issues, or things that could have been minor become major because they have an audience. And then, remove those students that are looking for an audience if you have to. It is easier to regain control of a situation when you don't have all the onlookers. And then learners need to be in class, but we know sometimes adults, we get to our limits as well. And there's that student that pushes those buttons. And I know you can think of that student in your head right now, whether you're administrator, counselor, classroom teacher, there's always that one student that just kind of, get you upset, or get you like at a level that you're not always able to control. So create a plan to give yourself a break with other staff in the building. Have those students take a walk to take a note to another staff, or in another classroom to help for a few. Plan it with your team teacher. I had a friend, we would break out. Like, I would go to her classroom, she would go to mine, and we'd switch for a minute, teach, and then go back. And it's really important to have those people that you can do that with. Or a lot of the kids that are antsy and bouncing in their seats and driving you crazy, sometimes that walk or them carrying heavy books or things like that to another classroom kind of regulates them, and then they can come back and they pull it together, and you finish your lesson and life goes on. But remember, building relationships and creating that classroom community, it does help keep kids in the classroom and learning. If you have a good relationship with your students, 9 times out of 10, it is going to keep you where you need to be. With your students, they're going to want to listen. They're going to want to be there. And at the beginning of the year, I always did the interest inventory for my students. And, it would help build those conversations about what they liked or disliked. I know a lot of times now when you go to meetings, they're like, oh, tell us your favorite. Like yesterday, we talked about what was your favorite time of year, or what's your favorite fall activity. Doing things like that with your kids, it's the same. Learning about your kids, learning about your staff. If you're an administrator and you're in meetings, taking 2 minutes to learn something new about your staff. There is things that you would learn about people. Like, one of our staff members spoke 4 languages and we didn't know till 4 years later. I mean, that would have been very beneficial to know in the beginning. So there's those things, that these little 2-minute activities that we could do with our students and with our adults in the building. And it just helps build that school climate. I mean, having those people that you can connect with or that can maybe support you in a way that you don't know how. One of our teachers was like, I really need help with fractions. I'm not good at teaching it. That's hard to say to another teacher. So she went there, wanted to learn different ways to do it. I need that support. And sometimes a lot of people in our buildings, especially new teachers, do not feel supported, or they don't feel like they have a place that they can go to talk to. Kind of mentoring or pairing up with a new teacher helps them, become better teachers because they learn from those years of experience. And there's a lot of things that we can show. Don't leave your team teachers or don't leave people in your building out on an island. If they're struggling, try to find ways to build those relationships and those rapports with those people as well, just like you would your students. Because if everybody in your building, your staff is getting along, your staff is working together, it makes the whole building function better. They're able to work with the students better. It's kind of, it's a well-oiled machine. And sometimes if you got something that's not working, you might have to do something different to make it work. Let's take a 5-minute break. I kind of went through that a little bit fast. Again, I'm trying to keep your time into perspective. So if you guys want to just take about a 5-minute break, stretch, take a drink, whatever you guys need to do. I have that it's 9:50, so we could come back at 9:55 and just take a minute, take a breath, do what you need to do, and come back, grab a snack, whatever it is. All right, we got about a little less than a minute left. If you guys want to come back, we'll get started back. Hope everybody was able to take at least a stretch break. I know sitting these meetings can be long. All right, I have 9:55, so we'll go ahead and get started. Started back. One of the things I wish I would have said a minute ago, since we do have some administrators on here and counselors and people that do those walkthroughs of their school building, a lot of times we have new teachers or teachers that are struggling in some area, and we might go in and give them a note, hey, that didn't go well, hopefully next time it'll be better. My administrator will be the first to tell you that he was not good about giving. He would give the feedback, but he would give nothing else with it. So if you were a new teacher and you got some bad feedback, you had no idea how to fix it. So, just reminding yourselves that, okay, that lesson didn't go well on compare and contrast. Here's what you could do differently, or have your curriculum coach come in and teach them some different things that they could use or different methods. Not everybody had the same education. Not everybody had the same classes. If you're giving your teachers a negative, think about giving them those 5 positives to the 1 negative. So making sure you also give them not only the constructive criticism, but giving them something back that they can take with them, and learn from it. Anything that we do, we want staff or students to learn from. So with PBIS, in mind, again, that 5 to 1, and making sure that you're giving teachers something that they can take away with them. You want them to learn and be better. So, just make sure that you're having someone else support them, or maybe mentoring them with a more experienced teacher to learn some other ways to do things as well. And I don't know about you all, but this next slide, I had this teacher, and she would not make it probably in the schools today. You couldn't hear a pin drop in her classroom. Her heels would click on that wood floor, and she was tough, and she had that many rules. It was just, looking back, I feared her, but I really respected her and I liked her a lot. But her rules and expectations were definitely more than anybody should have had to deal with. So when we're looking at rules and expectations for our classrooms and school-wide, just make sure that they're simple, age appropriate, and no more than 5. Because really, any more than that, people are not paying attention. Kids can't keep up with it, especially small kids. I put this in here, even though a lot of us are not doing virtual classroom, but just some virtual classroom management, teaching students how to use it, creating and modeling those classroom expectations like eyes on me, staying muted, working in a quiet area of the home. Thinking about how the students will get supplies ready when they're switching activities, how they need to prepare for class. One school I loved, they created backgrounds for their students so that every student's background was the same, whether they were virtual, whether it's virtual or whatever. It had bulletin board paper that they took to every single student. So when they were working, their background was just that same background. So kids didn't have an opportunity to bully or, say, oh man, your house is a mess. Everybody had that same background behind them. And they wore the same color shirt if possible, just to make it where it was kind of like nobody could say, oh, so-and-so's in their pajamas, or, it was just kind of the expectations. Creating those hand signals that they can use to gain attention to, just like we did, I showed you in the classroom, they did use the same ones. And creating a plan for praise and rewards, even in a virtual setting. And really 2021 did show us being prepared for anything. And I think if anybody can say that teachers, schools, educators, anybody in a school, I mean, you all could rule the world, because you all were able to take what happened so instantly, turned into a virtual classroom. Like, I can't even imagine being in the classroom during that time. And just, like even trying to support staff during that time was so difficult, because I was like, I don't know what to do. They were already doing it. You guys were the ones out there already building these. You were exhausted, working overtime, doing everything you needed to do. And, I can't even say enough. I mean, that to me is just amazing, the way that schools turn things around so quickly, and districts that just did it just like that. No, didn't even blink an eye, just kept going. And you can always still use PBIS in a virtual setting. You just have to create those same expectations. This is something that I used at the beginning of the year to keep me on track. You can find these online. You can create your own. You could create one as a team. You could do it as school-wide. You could do it, individually. Teachers Pay Teachers has some of these resources. It's just your classroom procedure checklist. So this is like, what am I going to teach my kids? What do I need to teach them? Attendance, lunch count, morning routine, packing up, end of the day. You can see them. Whatever you need to teach in your classroom, create that list to make sure that you go over every single procedure that you want to do for the year. And it just kind of helped keep me on track as well. And let's see. My computer's moving a little slow. There we go. And then, a virtual check room or classroom checklist. So, planning for attention, planning for rewards and praise. Gosh, and my friend would say, trying to do kindergarten was insane. She was like, one kid would hold up a cat and be like, oh, look at my cat. And then the whole class would be lost. So, planning for those interruptions, plans for teaching parents about that virtual platform, virtual expectations, parent meetings, same thing. You want to, if you're doing PBIS in the classroom, you're going to do it in the virtual classroom as well. And this was just some examples of morning routines, classroom rules. And some students need that visual, and I'm a visual learner, so I always liked having a visual. Again, no more than 5 classroom rules is that rule of thumb. And having those expectations around in certain areas, like your reading group, having your reading group expectations up, having your classroom expectations up, having your reading corner expectations, like having that visual, like sitting quietly on the rug, have a picture of that. All those things help. And I know it seems like a lot of work, but it's a lot more work trying to extinguish behaviors or trying to constantly tell a kid to stop getting up to sharpen a pencil, or, all that stuff takes away from your classroom. If you do all this pre-work, and it really is not as bad as it seems, it makes your year go so much smoother. I promise you that. Virtual learning expectations, you can have the same kind of rules that you can show at the beginning and go over every time you get ready to get started. Next, we're going to talk about teaching and modeling transitions. And, you know, if I look at the statewide data, most of the behavior in the state in Kentucky always occurs in classroom, hallway, cafeteria. That's like the top three, in bathroom, but, or, you know, that common area. But always classroom, hallway. Most of the time, hallway obviously is either one, not enough adults are monitoring. Hallways are chaotic. We know high schools, it can be crazy. I wish I would have downloaded this video. It was a great video that we show in one of our PBIS trainings, and it's a boy, and he shows the proper way to go through the hallways, and it's kind of cute because he's like, girls try to stop and talk to him. He's like, I'm not a player. I'm going to class. And then like somebody wants to say something about the football game. Sorry, buddy, got to go to class. And, you know, teaching high school students how to transition seems impossible, but it doesn't have to be. Having adult presence in general kind of helps make that behavior issues to a minimal. So anytime there's transitions, I would encourage, or even like your kids coming in the morning, leaving in the afternoon, having an adult at every single doorway, that is, you know, that's just kind of a good rule of thumb. That's all those eyes watching these students, making sure that there's no incidents happening, whether it's high school, middle, elementary, preschool. You know, adult presence does make a difference. If we're busy doing something else and not paying attention as our kids are dismissing, they could be pushing each other out the doors or knocking people down the hallway, running to their buses. We have to teach all of those transitions. You know, assemblies. Oh, man. I always hated assembly day because you never knew what your kids were going to do and it would stress you out. Well, we practiced assemblies ahead of time. We practiced recess, lunch, specials, class changes, picture day, special events, all those emergency drills, any possible interruption, and virtual as well. We do the same thing. You know, how should a child sit on the bus? What are the bus expectations? So we worked even with our bus staff to try to get us to a place where the kids knew the expectations from the moment they got on the bus till the end of the day when they left the classroom. Everyone knew the expectation. We practiced assemblies. If an adult came into the room, my students knew that their voices went on zero. They were not allowed to interrupt or anything like that unless it was an emergency while an adult stepped into the room to ask a question or whatever. You have to teach for all those things. We can't just expect kids know that, or they know that that's good manners or things like that. We have to teach those expectations and model them, and have your counselors come in. Counselors go in and, you know, help teachers model those expectations, you know, when you're checking in with the students. And emergency drills, you know, can be chaotic as well. So, you know, practicing those numerous times is always a good rule of thumb. And lockdowns, things like that, just being prepared for those things. You know, this is another example of those hallway expectations and rules. And, you know, just whatever it is in your hallway, what you expect, model it, have the kids practice it over and over. If they can't do it, you have it practice it, you know, have them practice during one of their preferred times. I mean, it just sometimes you have to. If there's a student that just will not do the right thing or just wants to make poor choices in the hallway, sometimes having them practice over and over will get them where they are, walking in the right way in the classroom. And you want that because you want, as the years progress, all those behaviors that the students have been taught just follows them year to year. Virtual transition expectations, again, just teaching them how to put their books away, stretch breaks, things like that. And then teaching and modeling that classroom community. So you must teach and model a bully-free classroom from day one with no tolerance for bullies. When I say that, I also include teachers and staff as well, because sometimes, you know, it does happen. There is teachers that end up being a little bit more abrasive with students, and, you know, sometimes the teacher ends up being a bully or, you know, seeming like the bully, or an adult staff in the building. And sometimes, you know, the teachers tend to bully each other, and it does happen. And it is hard to work with a lot of people. So, you know, building that classroom and school-wide community, again, you know, does help minimize some of that. You must teach students how to greet other staff, other adult staff members, peers, guests, and parents. Students don't know, again, what they don't know. You know, teaching them those expectations and being respectful of, you know, like different cultures, different races, different different things, different cultures might say, they're not allowed to look you in the eye. So when you're teaching expectations, keep all of that in mind, that all of your classroom community is represented. And the expectation is going to be universal for those kids, because everyone should, have a place in your classroom. And every adult should feel safe, valued, heard, and understood in your building and in your schools. These are the people that are going to help, keep the behavior down, get the students where they need to be. So if you're an administrator, counselor, staff, whatever your role is, making sure that every adult is valued, heard, and understood. And the kids should feel the same way. Creating that classroom environment through that trauma-informed lens, making sure that all your kids feel like they belong in your classroom is so important. Doing the same thing with a virtual community, creating virtual learning times to share, creating group team building activities if you are at home with your other teammates, acknowledging birthdays and other holidays, and this is virtual or in person. Creating a time to meet with your students individually, in person or virtual. Having those feeling check-in times, virtual games, mindfulness activities. There's tons of mindfulness activities on YouTube that you can walk your kids through. I did it in my special education classroom, and during that year I had 3 through 5, and even my 1, 2, and 3, when I had them, we used mindfulness, and I have students that still use it today, even in high school. One student said it just helped him get calmed down before testing. So before any assessments, we would do like a 5 or 10 minute walkthrough of a mindfulness activity. And I included a couple of scripts and like YouTube links or whatever in the Google link, but you can find tons of stuff out there, and you would be surprised at how well students do with learning to clear their mind and kind of calm themselves sometimes, especially if it's been a stressful day for them. And it's also a time for you to kind of clear your mind as well and do it with them. So it's like the catch 2020 is like, but you get all of it. Like everybody in the classroom is going to be feeling a little better after 5 or 10 minutes of that quiet and downtime. Sometimes that's necessary, and it doesn't have to be included in your schedule. Sometimes those things you can just every now and then pop those in as needed. Example of modeling that classroom community, again, having a feelings board, or, having pictures of kids with different feelings and words that students can use. We take care of ourselves, each other, our school, and our world. And, just having a little pledge for your class. How are they going to take care of each other, their school, or their world? What is that going to look like? What are you teaching them that's supposed to look like? So you got your classroom procedures in place, community is in place, your transitions are in place. So now what? Well, you need to prepare for your classroom, and you think about the things that that you have to deal with. So you got IEP accommodations, you've got substitute plans, you've got manipulative baskets for those students that have accommodations. How are we going to collect data? What are we going to do with our student information? Parent contact logs, special seating. What kind of students will I need to prepare for? Do I understand their cultural needs, their language needs, their religious needs, their disability? Special education teachers, how will you prepare the regular education teachers and school staff for your students? It's a lot, it is. But if we do some of the pre-work at the end, it makes it so much easier. So I'm going to try to go through some of these things with you and try to help you prepare a little better for these scenarios. And prepare, and I want you to prepare for an inclusive classroom where all these students see themselves represented and their needs are being met, every single student. So, you have to plan for all these things, and you want to make sure you're representing your classroom through pictures, your words, your classroom representation. Make sure your classroom is accessible. If it needs to meet the needs of students with wheelchairs, movement areas for kids that get those movement breaks, or standing accessibility for the student that has not been diagnosed but cannot sit down. Kids don't understand because it's not fair that a student gets to do certain things, but we have to teach them about why students get to do other things. They have to be able to understand some kids just need a little extra movement break. Or if you want to make it equal, you can make it sure that every student has a place where they can stretch or stand up if they need to at certain times, or however you want to do it. Know which teachers, special education, speech, ELL, occupational therapists, instructional assistants, counseling professionals, whoever works with your student, you should know who it is. And you should know why they work with your student. Because you want to be able to support whatever efforts they're doing back in the classroom as well. So being on that united front with those people, planning for those interruptions when they come to get the students. How are you going to make up the work that they miss when they're out of the classroom? How are you going to plan for them to come in and get the students? How do you plan for the students to return from those events? Creating that united front, though, will help you understand your whole child. Be prepared to teach about the needs of your students. If you got to teach about their disability, their language, their culture, speech concerns, everyone involved is responsible. I used to hate when someone would call and say, I need you to come get your student. It was not just my student, it is our student. What does our student need? And I was very vocal about that because it was everybody's responsibility that has that student in their care. So, just reminding yourselves, and not everybody knows about certain disabilities. So if you're a regular education teacher and, you and the special education teacher could get together and kind of have like a little, not necessarily a training, but just a quick little meeting to teach about what that student's needs may be. This is something that I did as a special education teacher because it was hard for my staff, my regular education staff, to be able to go through and look at an IEP to find out everything that my students need. So I would do like a beginning of the year checklist when I came in. I would go over my caseload, my IEPs, the accommodations my students needed, behavior sheets, their intervention plans, their sensory needs, movement needs, academics, all that. And I would go over the IEPs with who I needed to if there was something specific. I would give them their behavior intervention plans. I would go over their behavior sheets. I would do that with new staff and teachers and older teachers that might need a review. I would talk about creating manipulative baskets for the classrooms for the students to start using day one, because you can't wait for the month of testing and then tell the kids they can use their accommodations. Those students should have been using those accommodations all year long, and they know how to get them. I taught my students, no matter what grade level, what their accommodations were. I taught them how to ask adults for their accommodations. That's teaching the kids to be their own advocate as well. So making sure that you teach your students that, and that wherever they go, those teachers that they work with are going to know that they are allowed to have those things. Pre-planning and preparing for this kind of just kept everything so much smoother. Was it a little more work? Yes. And, this included, your special area teachers, your instructional assistants and staff that was going to be working directly with those students. Asked to do a review at the beginning of the year at a faculty meeting to go over accommodations, because they do change sometimes, behavior sheets, and it is your job as a teacher, classroom teacher, to keep up with behavior sheets and intervention plans. And we can teach you how to do it, but you still have to learn how to do those things. And you're responsible to make sure that those things are being met. So you have to kind of plan that into your day too. And I know it's one more thing, but it does have to be done. And just do some of that basic housekeeping, prepare your staff, and, try to support the ones that are new or that are just learning about some of the accommodations, however you can. Or if you're a regular classroom teacher, making sure you're doing everything you need to do for those students, because we are all responsible for the students we teach. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question? Maybe not. And then accommodation behavior cheat sheets. Listen, this is one of the easiest things I did. And as a classroom teacher, you can do it. As a special education teacher, you could do it for your regular education teachers. But I would make a list of accommodations, the students that they had and the accommodations that they had. All they had to do was look at that every day instead of going through the IEP trying to find it. It was very simple, but it made the world of difference for our classroom teachers. I think this is a good thing to try to get in the habit of doing, because it is a lot of work but this is easier. And especially if you're going to have a long-term sub or substitute come in, this is an easy way to see what your students need and what you can show them that they need without them seeing their IEP or any information that they shouldn't be seeing. This is another snapshot example, and you could do the needs that they have. Do they have behavior plans? Their accommodations. You could also add who's going to be picking them up at what time, whether, like if they have to go see OT or whoever, you can put all that on there. And then you have that right at your fingertips, and it's a lot easier to do that at the beginning of the year. And then as those ARCs come along and you're trying to, things change, they get more minutes, more accommodations, you can update those as you go, and it's just a lot easier to keep instead of trying to go through the entire IEP every single time. Staff don't know what they don't know, so review those basics of having special education students in the classroom and in the school, and include all staff, because sometimes staff don't understand why students are acting a certain way. And certain kids can't help some of the behaviors that they had. I had a student that had a traumatic brain injury. He would just yell out things just in the middle of the classroom sometimes, and they sent him to into an absolute frenzy because the teacher didn't know how to handle that. And it was something that, she wasn't able to handle, was those outbursts like that. And, just after we talked and we went through the process of what happens with him, then she started to understand more and it got a little better, but it's really hard if they don't know. Gather all the information about disability, share it with your staff at the beginning of the year. If you know a student's coming in with a disability and you're a regular education teacher, okay, let me look at this disability if I'm not sure about it, and some things that I might want to know. Prepare yourself for those things. Don't wait till the middle of the year and say, I have no idea what to do with this student that has autism or this student that needs these things that I don't know anything about. Making sure that your behavior concerns have been talked about, your ways to manage behavior, prevent it. One of the things that we did too was we met at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year when we started placing our special education students. We went through and made a card with their name, their disability, their, accommodations, how much time they needed for OT or other things. And it kind of helped teachers prepare that in their schedule for the next year, the teachers that were going to have them. So that we did that as a team. And it really helped to see where the students were going to be and get those IEPs to those teachers and really go over the information, and instead of getting it like a week or two into the school year. What will my classroom look like? Your whole building should represent your population through the stories that are read, the music they hear, the pictures of people in history. Anything through visual means students should be able to look and see that they belong. Having classroom books that teaches students about various disabilities. I did that. I read books about different disabilities, races, religion. Students, again, they don't know what they don't know. And I think it's great to, teach them about the people that are in their classroom. It helps build that classroom community or in their school. Preparing students to encounter students that are different from them. What's the right ways to ask things? I don't know about you all, but I hated when somebody would say, where are you from? Gosh, your country accent. Well, that used to drive me crazy because that's just really not the appropriate way to ask someone, oh, where are you from? You didn't have to mention the accent. And, it's the same for people from different countries, things like that. Your classroom climate, I always say your classroom reflects your teaching. So, what will your environment reflect? What does your climate in your classroom reflect? And I do hope it reflects an inclusive classroom where everyone, including staff and students, feel included, valued, and they know that they belong there. These are just some of the books that I used to use. And there's tons out there that you can look up. I just thought it was a great way to help students understand because, again, they don't know what they don't know. And adults as well, there was things that I learned through some of these books as well. And then like interracial children, Cinderella stories from around the world. Bob Marley, One Love, that was always one of my favorite books that I would read with my students. And And then we did bucket filler activities. This is something that you could do school-wide or you could do it classroom-wide. I'm not going to play the video for sake of time, but it is online, and it's about people going around with those invisible buckets. And every time you say something negative to a kid, it just dips from their bucket. If you're constantly negative, you are leaving them with an empty bucket and they're feeling really low. But if you start building that positive, man, you're filling their bucket, they start to feel better. They start to be better. They start to act better. And it's the same for adults. It's adults and children alike. We have to start filling those buckets. You know, if you're dipping from a bucket, you know, just remind yourselves, trying to find different ways to interact. If there's something negative, making sure you've got enough positives to fill that bucket back up, you know. But it's a great program. Kids could write good things and put in other pockets of kids' names. And there's the book, there's a video online, just an activity I wanted to share. Oh, I don't want that to play. Sorry.
Hello.
And then, you know, preparing for change again. You want a child to have a consistent day because most of the consistency they have is in your classroom. Schedules are posted. Consistent planning and going over the schedule and transitions prior to change is important for all students. I like to know what's going to happen next. Prepare students for the change, you know, prepare for those emergency drills ahead of time if you can. Being consistent, prepared, preventative. You're creating that classroom that through that trauma-informed lens, and it allows for a much smoother year. Students want to feel safe, prepared, and they need that consistency in their lives. How to prepare for being absent, emergency sub-plans, sub-binder, sub-list, student ambassadors to assist adults. We know right now we have a shortage of subs. We have no earthly idea on days that we know that we might have to be absent. There's nothing we can do to go to school to prepare for it if you're sick. I think COVID has taught a lot of us, I mean, like you go home one day and the next you get a call and you're stuck at home. So now what about your students? What about their sub plans? What about all that? So having that prepared took a little bit of time, but it was worth it in the end. And I'm going to show you what I did. So emergency sub plans, what I would include is letters describing your classroom, your students of concern that might have a little bit more needs than most, students that have special allergies or receive medications. You want to have that in your schedule, but you also want to have that available for them. A class list, how to take attendance. I don't know about you all, that was what I used to always get in trouble for. I'd forget to take attendance. Technology logins, or a name of a student that oversees that. You know, we had our geek squad, and that was the people that would log all the computers in. Your teacher computer login or special login. Accommodation sheets for those students with their disabilities. Behavior sheets, and how to fill it out. Picture of students with their names. So I had a laminated picture of my desks. And I would, you know, you move your students around, so they were Velcroed. So I would put their little pictures so they knew where they were supposed to be sitting. They couldn't pull the wool over nobody's eyes. And you could move those around as you needed to in your sub plans. And then you can know which students were which, because you know, it's hard when you go in as a sub, you know nothing. So it kind of helps make things a little bit more familiar. And then a map of the school highlighting any areas that the entire class may need to travel to, emergency exits, all those lockdown procedures, phone lists for emergencies, like if you're having a behavior issue, principal, nurse, whoever, special education teacher, schedule with folders to pull applicable work assignments. This is what took some time. So you made file folders, and you could put a file folder for reading with different reading assignments. And this is an emergency sub box. So it didn't necessarily have to meet what you were doing at the time, but it could just be reviews of things. I mean, it's an emergency situation, so at least you have some content. You could have a book that they needed to read, or you could assign certain things out of their books that you wanted them to review. Maybe they were struggling in areas, and that's the areas you picked for them to work on a day that you had to be absent. Writing prompts, writing practice, grammatics, math, journaling. You could do SEL assignments through the same way. You could do videos and then have the kids to respond to it. But having all those things available was the main thing. Making sure they have all of these things so that if you have to be absent, people aren't scrambling trying to get things for your kids. You're not feeling guilty because you couldn't be there. Those things are ready. And you know, if the administrator knows that that's in every single classroom, it makes their job a lot easier as well. And you know, having those folders for completed work, having the students put their homework or important notes, you know, having a place for it in that binder, like if you have notes that need to go to the office, making sure they get up there, but have all of that all in one place. And it is hard to get it all together, but once it's together, you don't have to stress about it if there's an emergency situation. Using a clear tub that's easy to find, maybe everybody has the same one. You know, it has the binder, the classwork, everything a sub needs, all the papers, links, whatever. Instructions on smart boards, everything should have instructions. It shouldn't be something that they can't figure out, or they have someone that comes in and does it and you guys have already worked that out. But it could be something the entire school does, a grade level or team, you know, however you decide to do it. Having a school substitute list at the main office is a great place because that way, and then the teachers all have a copy in what they specialize in, because you know some subs only want to do special education or regular education or grades, and you have that, and you kind of create your list of people that you would have preferred to come and sub in your building, people that really work well in your building. And the phone numbers are easily accessible. So if you need to, you know, you're going to be out in 2 weeks for a doctor's appointment, you can call that sub ahead of time. You know, and how's that name, how's the names, you know, again, at that front office. And if it's not school-wide, create your own list or for your grade level, just so that you guys have something that you can always go to. And it's not somebody different all the time. So it kind of keeps it consistent for your students as well. Updating the list as needed. You know, throughout the year, people change, they get a full-time job and they leave. So just knowing who you can call. Student ambassadors. Oh my gosh, this is a great way, you know, to allow them to get some leadership opportunities. They assist adults that are not familiar with the school. Those kids can also lead parents to assemblies or class meetings or whatever they're going to, you know, finding students that can do those things. It's a good opportunity to teach them leadership skills, give it to them because of good behavior, teach kids about how they can earn those things. Some of your kids that struggle or like to talk, give them a good chance to use some of those skills. Have them apply for the position to teach them things that they can use later on. Give them an interview, student government positions, classroom jobs, teacher recommendation letters. They need to learn all of these skills, and that can start at an early age, and you can kind of scaffold it according to grade. And those student-adult relationships will determine the right students for the job. I loved this. I don't even remember where I saw it, but I love it. The adults at central office are meeting, principals are meeting, assistant principals are meeting, counselors are meeting, teachers are meeting. However, no one meets with us, and we're the ones you're meeting about. So, you know, keeping your students involved in their education is really important. Making sure they understand where they're at, what they're struggling with, what they may need to do to improve. It is important to have those meetings with students. And I always try to do Friday meetings just because it's the end of the week. The other students would be working on something else, and I would just rotate the students, show them how they did for the week and what they might need to work on. You could create a student folder, which I did a folder for each student that had an IEP in my classroom. Second grade, when I taught second, I just had, you know, the dividers for each student where I kept like parent contact logs, test scores, grades, anything that was going to be beneficial, you know, for those students to have. And then I would go over those things with those students. Or if you wanted to do the individual folders that you would always pull from meetings, you could do that. But allow those students to take some leadership roles in meetings with families and within your school-based teams. Student voice is important because these are the kids that, you know, they're going to tell you what their school needs. So, you know, having them be part of that, or even in your classroom expectations when you're building them, have your students be part of that. building those foundations, teaching yourselves and your students self-regulation. You got to learn to regulate your own emotions when you're in various situations. And it's not all adults are built with that. Not all adults are able to handle certain situations, and that's okay. It's taken me a lot of years to even get, to where I am, and I didn't know, and I've learned a lot through different trainings or different staff or people that show me different things. And, not all students come in with the ability or the tools to control their emotions. And, you will be the determining factor of how students handle their emotions in the classroom. And I always say I have a 3-year-old, and he is going to get a lot of calls because his emotions is really hard. But, I've been trying to teach him, because when he gets embarrassed, he gets angry instead of just being embarrassed. So trying to teach him that, but he's like, I'm angry. But when he's mad all over. So, I've been trying to teach him, but not every child comes in with, those words, that vocabulary, the things that they need when they come into your doors. And not every adult that comes in your building is going to be prepared for that. So as an administrator, counselor, this is important to make sure your students and your staff have the supports and things that they need to control some of these things. Model for students how to use the right words for the right emotions, demonstrate what that looks like. Practice using words and allowing students the opportunities to claim their feelings, just like we did at the beginning of the meeting. Name it to tame it. And you can make it age appropriate for whatever grade level. Have them express their feelings through writing or drawing, depending on their ability. Having that daily student check-in once you've taught these emotions, allow yourself and your student mental breaks. Plan that in your day, or make them unplanned if your students just need a break and you can tell you've had a long teaching session and they just need a minute. You can make it, a quick little mindfulness activity or just quiet time or whatever it needs to be. Sometimes kids just need a break like we do. Some ideas for self-check-in is just checking in according to, grade and ability. Again, you can scaffold. However you need to do it for your students' grade level and their ability level. Teach the emotions and have students do different exercises to practice. Little kids, I love having a face picture on the corner of their desk. Part of their morning routine is coming in and drawing the emotion that they're feeling, or throughout the day, maybe they need to change the emotion. Having students write the word to represent the facial expression. Again, name it to tame it. Having a word bank for students to use that's age appropriate. Have examples around the room of what emotions may look like, or a chart for reference. And then, students that have a little bit, higher grade level or a little bit more ability, even high school students could journal about things. Having students write a sentence or a paragraph about how they are feeling, what they're going to do to self-regulate and make their day better. Teaching kids those skills. My friend, she always used to do this. She would rub the insides of the palms of her hands, and she still does that. She was taught that as a young child. Her mom was an educator, and that is how she self-regulates. So she does that a lot. And there's lots of different things out there for kids to self-regulate, for adults to self-regulate. And I've actually shared something in the Google Drive for that. Children's books about self-regulation. There is some books out there that you guys can do with them. How to teach preschoolers self-control. Zones of regulation check-in, like what zone are you in? You could have a kid that you could have these 4 things on their desk and have them choose what zone they're in at the time. Self-management strategies like balloon breathing, taking a break strategy, like if a student's able to take a break, they have like a menu to choose from. Planning for all of these things, again, it is a little work, but it does make your year go a lot better. And all this, again, is like, this is your PBIS Tier 1 review. We do these Tier 1 trainings. These are examples of ways to really implement PBIS at Tier 1 in your classroom. And, making sure as administrators and counselors, we're supporting our staff and being there to help them do some of these things and get some of these things in place. Again, I was not taught this in school. I don't know if you guys were or had some of these things. I didn't learn this until I was, midway into my teaching career. And, it would be nice if teachers came in and have some of these things when they come in. We have staff turnover that's so high right now. Teachers are burnout. Subs are coming in. We have emergency certified teachers. There's just a lot of things that we could do to support those people, a lot more that are coming into our buildings. Teach those expectations, transitions, teach praise, have a system for rewards, and prepare students and staff for that successful year. Make sure your data collection systems is determined. It's done efficiently, intentionally, and discussed at every meeting. And if you're a PBIS Tier 1 school, you're going to plan, it's recommended to plan your meetings for the year so staff can plan around them, because it's important for staff to get together and to be able to work together and train together and learn together. The more expectations that are taught, practiced, and retaught, the less instructional time that you'll lose in the long run. Remember, you can't discipline a child that has not been taught the expectation for behavior. And building a strong foundation for the classroom and school-wide, Tier 1 is for everyone. So make sure that, you have those expectations in place. And I know, again, it's a lot of work, but if you do these things up front, it does make your school year a lot easier. And I just want to review our objectives again. To obtain preventative strategies and information about PBIS and positive behavior interventions and supports, and to review Tier 1 interventions to start the school year and refresh classroom strategies with a proactive approach, whether you're virtual or in person. So I hope that I met these for you guys today. And as I've got just a little bit more and we'll wrap up, I want you to think about how you are. You cannot have good learning conditions until you first have good teaching conditions. So you have to take care of yourselves. And I know that's not always easy. You go home thinking about these students and what you need to do the next day, but you have to take care of yourselves. You can't teach if you're not in a good state of mind. So find ways to take care of you. If you're an administrator or counselor, make sure that you're taking care of your staff, because they may not say it, but most of them need some kind of supports. So find ways to build that into your school year as well. I also added the Kentucky Impact Data survey here. And, I want you guys to look at your area and I encourage your administrators or district administrators, counselors to look at that and see how are you all really doing. If you see a school that, if you're at your school and you're looking at your area and your teachers aren't doing well and they're worried about their own well-being and the well-being of their classroom, other classroom teachers, then something needs to be done. We can't just leave our teachers out there feeling this way. We got to make sure that we're out there in the trenches with them and we're supporting them every way we know how. They can't take care of the kids that comes through the doors until they're taking care of themselves. And, taking care of adults at Tier 1, you can't pour from an empty bucket. You got to ensure that all your staff is being treated with respect and compassion. Make sure that they are seen, heard, valued. Take time for self-care with each other, your staff. Allow for some self-care time in their day. Create a quiet environment that they could go into for, their lunch or just a break. Kids have these sensory rooms. Maybe there's a small room an adult could go in to take a little break in between their planning times, or, creating an environment of community with your staff, and, stop adult bullying and gossiping in the building before it starts. The last thing you need is teachers arguing in your building, and it's hard sometimes, but making sure that it's stopped in its tracks and, work from there. Find a way for staff to take a break for bathroom breaks. And, after a crisis especially, there's nothing worse than having a major crisis and then have to go directly back into teaching. Give them a minute to collect themselves some way, somehow. Celebrate your staff as often as you can, because they are doing things that most of people couldn't handle in a day. Get some staff wellness training with me. I do cultivating with staff wellness and leading staff wellness training. I want you to understand, like, you have to take care of these adults, you know, in the building. And I want the adults to understand they have to take care of each other. And really think about the video that I shared at the beginning. I want you guys to think about, this is your team, these are your people, and we don't always know what they're going through. So be compassionate and just really empathetic to some of their needs. Our PBIS team, my office is full of great people that do lots of great trainings. We want to assist you where you are. We can help you build and fine-tune systems already in place. We have trainings to fit every need. We work around your schedule. We can train virtually or in person as needed. And if you guys want to learn more, you can look at our PBIS trainings at KDE and you contact me. I'm the person that would be your main contact for other PBIS trainings. And these are some that are on our fall calendar. Now, if you are a school that's already doing PBIS, you know, you can look where it might fit your needs. If you're a school or district that's interested in doing PBIS, you know, you would contact me and we can get you going through some readiness and we can get you started. But we're here for support. You know, a lot of people, I remember people used to say, oh my gosh, KDE is in the building. Well, I don't want you all to think of me like that. I want you to think of, oh my gosh, KDE is in the building. Like, I want it to be different because I want to be a support for the people that are out there in the trenches, because that's what I took this job for. I didn't want to do it unless it meant that I was giving something back to the people that needed it. I know what it's like to be burnout, tired, overworked, you know, all that. Our Safe and Supportive Schools branch, we have a variety of initiatives. We do school safety concerns, mental health wellness, suicide prevention, bullying prevention. I'm an OVAS bullying trainer. Substance abuse prevention, human trafficking, child sexual abuse, emergency operations planning. We do Too Good for Drugs, sources of strength. And then I also have a 2-day de-escalation training that'll be going on the calendar at the beginning of the year in our winter flyer. Again, as a OVAS bullying instructor, I will tell you we're waiting to see any schools that sign up in the next little bit are going to get all the free products from OVAS bullying prevention, the training, everything is free. The only thing that you have to pay for is it's like a little prerequisite quiz or whatever. But if we can get 1 or 2 schools signed up in the next little bit, they're going to get all those free. So the whole training for your staff, all the books, all those things would be free for you all. We have youth mental health first aid. We actually have some training initiatives that are coming out soon. So Regina Dawson is our person at KDE, our training coordinator. You would connect with her for any of these other trainings. Me, I'm all the PBIS and some of the self-care and things like that. Again, youth mental health first aid is available, and all these trainings that we give are free for you all. We can come do it as a school, district, you know, and we try to meet you guys where you are. So times, things like that, we work with you all. There's documents in that Google folder again that includes those PBIS lesson plans, mindfulness documents, self-regulation for adults and students. One thing that I would ask, and I would love for you guys to do, it always helps me, I would love for you to tell me one thing that you'll take away in the chat box. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat box or unmute. And I think Mr. Belcher is going to put an evaluation form in the link in the chat box to fill out. And then at the end of this session, if you'll just hit the red leave button after you are finished,